One person's craziness is another person's reality. This is a quote from my favorite director, Tim Burton. Burton is often seen as a dark figure, as weird, abnormal, and strange. Some may even say that they don't like his films and that he's not good. When I watch one of his films, I see a deeper meaning than what's right in front of my eyes. When I think of Tim Burton, I think of one of the most underrated figures in the movie industry that people just haven't given a full opportunity. Today, I want to give you a brief history on Burton, a very small section of some of his films and the techniques within them, and finally, what all he's been a part of. First, Burton grew up in a very average neighborhood in Burbank, California, living a normal life. He spent most of his younger years watching low-budget horror films. Shocking. He later attended the California Institute of the Arts, and like so many that he graduated with, went on to be animators for Disney. He worked on a few short films for them, but later Disney felt that he just wasn't Disney material and his workings just weren't appropriate for their target audience. While leaving Disney, Burton quoted, "I just was not Disney material. I couldn't draw cute foxes for the life of me." It's funny to think that in the 70s he wasn't Disney material, but since then, Disney and Burton have teamed up, and just this past year even came out with the movie Frankenweenie together. Second, some of his movies and the techniques within them. His first major film was Edward Scissorhands, which premiered December of 1990. This film is largely seen as Tim's autobiography of his childhood. He is essentially Edward, and he's a misfit and an outsider to this normal place. He's an outsider who cannot touch what he desires most without destroying it. It's humorous that such a disturbing and disfigured creature is actually simply overlooked and is seen as quite normal to the people of this town. It's ironic that actually Edward is the most frightening creature, but he's not the monster. It's the townsfolk in this movie. They are the reasons for his loss of innocence. In this film, one of his major techniques that he uses is something called long shots. Long shots are used in films to make the viewers worry for the character. They pan out on the character, making them look very vulnerable. An example of this in Edward Scissorhands is in the very beginning of the film. One of the main characters, Peg, is walking into this castle, and as she's walking into the top room, this attic, it's very empty. They pan out on her, making her look very small in this very large open space, causing her to look vulnerable and having the viewer question, is she going to make it out okay? Another large production of Burton's was The Nightmare Before Christmas of 1993. This originally was just a storybook created for children by Burton, and it was something so much bigger than he could have imagined. Once again, his leading character was just a misfit outsider, but his intentions were always sincere. This setting of this movie is Halloween Town, which is a very dark and gray place, but it's filled with these lively, bright, odd creatures with personalities to match. His characters are out of this world imaginative, and they're something that many people couldn't even think of on a normal day. The statistic of this film is that 96% of the critics and viewers that watched it enjoyed it. And I think that people forget that he has created some very, very memorable films that will go on for generations to come, but they don't always see him as the genius because he is so odd. One more film to make note of is 2005's Corpse Bride, and unlike The Nightmare Before Christmas, it was artistic animation, which isn't often used because it's very difficult to master. In this film, he uses a complex interaction between darkness and light, and you notice that his trademark ghoulish characters are more alive than anything that's living. In this film, his world that's alive is so dead and dark and gray, and nobody has any life in their faces. But once you go down into his underworld, his land of the living is very odd and it's bright with this loud, happy music and these dancing skeletons and singing spiders to match. And that's the funny thing about Burton's artwork. is that he doesn't do it for the money, he does it because he simply enjoys it. And it's not because he thinks he's good, it's because it's what's in his head. He's taught his viewers and his fans to embrace the nightmare and make it into something happy that you won't be scared of. This film isn't really great for a family audience that it's intended for, but for an adult, such as myself, who hasn't fully given up on happily ever afters or what goes on in the dark, it hits right home. And finally, what all he's been a part of and what he's accomplished. Burton has essentially created his own genre of films. When you go out to see one of his films, you know what you're going to get yourself into. You're going to find something dark, but with some underlying humor and bright, weird creatures to match. Overall, he's produced 21 films, directed 29, written 13, and acted in 8 of them. Not only is he a director, but he's a producer, a writer, an artist, and an actor, and not many can say that. Overall, he's been a part of a total of 34 productions. I feel that his style is entirely hit or miss. You either love him or you don't. His films are quirky and odd with the artwork to match. But I feel that the general audience misunderstands the deeper meaning behind each of his films. I'm entirely biased. I love his films. I think they're incredible. When I watch one of his films, I do the same I would as if I were reading a book. I put myself into the main character's shoes and I find myself in the plot so much deeper than I would if I were simply staring at the screen. You notice the small things that actually mean something, and you don't miss out on those big hidden subline meanings in each film. I think Tim Burton is one of the greatest of our time for the very reason that he's overlooked. He's simply different than what we know, and he just hasn't always been given the chance that he deserves. In conclusion, today I've given you a brief history of Burton. I've showed you a small section of his films and the techniques within them, and finally what all he's been a part of. I hope that the next time you sit down to maybe watch one of his films, you can actively watch it, putting yourself into the movie to find the deeper meaning behind what is actually being said and see what he really means. Thank you.